Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sean McEwen and I'm the publisher of Inside Aging. And this is actually our first webinar for the year, so welcome once again. I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, Anna Millicer. Anna is the founder of the Home Care HQ newsletter, and Anna's business won the Consumer Experience category in the 2022 Future of Aging Awards. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Great, and probably just to, because it's been a while since we've done a Future of Aging Awards webinar, just to sort of provide a little bit of a background, the awards, this is now their 5th year, and very much they're designed to not just recognise and call out best practice in aged care services, but also to share the stories behind the people and behind the products and technology that really are shaping the future of this sector. So today's webinar and the stories you read on Inside Aging are very much the backbone of what the awards is about, because we think these stories need to be told, and the judging process is very thorough. And I'll just touch on that just very, very briefly. You can sort of see there what it takes to win an award. So it's very thorough. Each of these categories here, or sorry, these criteria, they are given a rating of 1 to 5, 5 obviously being a high score. So you can imagine you're scoring a score of 1 to 5 across 4 different criteria. So you end up with a score that's quite robust. And we've got 5 judges, so 5 different points of view, a very robust mechanism to judge. It's quite well explained there, but as I've said here, we're not looking for just big ideas. We're looking for things that have been proven in the context of aged care and can be taken out and expanded into other regions, other providers, and as I said earlier, things that are really going to shape the future of this sector. So Anna has gone through that. So she, her business, Home Care HQ newsletter, went through that judging process and has come out as the highly commended in the consumer experience category last year, which was a very highly entered category. Consumer experience obviously is a very hot topic, and anything that can help with that is certainly of interest, and we had a lot of people enter that category. So Anna, I might start with you. If you can tell us a bit about Home Care HQ and just what it is that you're delivering to the sector.
Absolutely, thank you, and thanks again. I was really delighted. My team and I were really delighted with the award. So it was great to be acknowledged. So look, how did it all start? I suppose COVID was probably the precursor really to how it all began. So during 2020 and 2021, I sort of switched and pivoted a little bit like everyone else, and I began to conduct an engagement and communication preferences survey on behalf of home care package providers nationally. And we had well over 700 consumers and family members that responded to that survey. And the results really very overwhelmingly showed that older people wanted quite different information to what was available to them at that time, either through the sector or through the information that was being shared with them by their own home care provider. So ultimately, Home Care HQ newsletter was created to fill that knowledge gap and the information gap that consumers had and family members had, and really to help the providers that wanted to deliver that information to their clients, but they was either strapped for time, or they didn't have the subject matter expertise, or they just didn't quite know where to start and had so much else on their plate. And the sorts of things that people would often say to me is, they're constantly getting emails from the marketing team or from whoever's putting together a newsletter saying, has anyone got anything for the newsletter? And it was just that dead silence that would occur, and everyone would run a mile and hide because there was just no time for them to be able to pull it together. So we reached out to COTA Australia and Carers Australia when we first started the idea of the newsletter, and we were fortunate enough to be endorsed by both of those organisations. at a national level. So because they so strongly believe in being able to share information with the sector as well. And we distribute information from the Department of Health, Health and Aged Care, Engagement Hub, as well as the Quality and Safety Commission. And yeah, so I can show you some examples if you're ready for that now, Sean, if that
Yeah,
makes
sure, absolutely. And just when you get that ready, Anna, just a reminder to everybody on the call that this is a live session, so you can ask questions. Just type those into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen.
Alrighty, so I'll just bring that up for you so that you can see that. So can you see that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so look, I won't go into much detail here, but essentially just to show you what it looks like. So, but basically the way that the newsletter works is that there is a monthly newsletter that we create in our team, and we actually then distribute that directly to our subscribers, who are the provider themselves. Then the provider is responsible for actually distributing that to their clients. We can talk about that a little bit more. I think there's a couple of pre-submitted questions that I'm happy to go through, but just to really show you what this might look like. So here's a couple of examples of some of the pages that we might put in and the types of content that we would cover. So, you know, there's always a product spotlight, and, you know, our team spend a lot of time researching really good products, especially if they're Australian based. And we always make sure that we've tested, not the actual product, but we test the websites and make sure that they're easy for people to access, that the products are really going to do what they need to do. And then when we're talking about products, we don't take advertising or any money or anything like that. And we always make sure that we introduce the concept of the product, and then talk about like how when it comes to purchasing a product, especially with home care package funding, that the care plan and budget and assessments need to reflect what that purchase actually is. So that's we always make sure we wrap those sorts of things up there. Similarly, on this side, we would cover an issue. This is where I know through my decades of experience in the sector that providers need to have a continuous improvement plan. So everyone's going to have one. So rather than just telling clients, well, we've got a continuous improvement plan, what we do is we talk about it in terms of, in the provider's voice, the commitment to providing and improving our services, how we actually do that. So what they would actually, how they know that we're doing this work while behind the scenes. And why are we doing it? And it's basically around, so we put information about why it occurs. And then we talk about how, how it actually helps us as a provider to stay on track and to constantly be looking to what's happening in the sector and building knowledge as to be a provider, of excellence. Again, we'll have something in every edition about aged care quality and safety, but generally not just about saying, here's standard one and what it is. It's really where we talk about what's happening in the sector and how we can actually build any changes or reforms into what we do as a provider, what that might mean to you, what some of the key issues are. And then if you want more information, then there'll be more information available, either by getting in touch with the provider and having a chat with them, or in many instances, we'll actually put a link in there as well. Just on the other side here, tackling antibiotic resistance. Now, we know that antimicrobial stewardship is not the most exciting topic from a consumer perspective, but what it means is that there's still things that home care providers need to be able to do that shows that we're, across what it is that our obligations are and trying to help our clients keep safe. So we'll talk about, generally speaking, what is it, what's the issue, where do we get information, how can you potentially, in this case, 5 things you can do to reduce antibiotic resistance. And then we wrap it up at the end talking about tips. So, seek medical advice, take your Webster pack with you, or if to the doctors, and let people know if you're on a prescribed antibiotic and if you need assistance. And that's the stuff that's around helping providers and their consumers continue to keep that line of communication open. As much as I think pretty much every month we'll have something in here that talks about diversity in one form or another, whether it's cultural diversity, LGBTQI+, and the Silver Rainbow programs, and what that means for, as a provider, like what they can expect to see and how respect for people's cultural preferences and differences actually comes through, and where there's any products and really great stuff in the sector, we'll bring that to their attention as well. And just lastly, we'll often have something around, a common health issue for consumers, whether it's continence or osteoporosis or whatever it happens to be. But rather than going into describing the medical condition, we talk about it in terms of how it might impact on their lifestyle, what they can expect from us in terms of when we know that there's an issue like this. Then we'll say, this is how we might work with you when this happens, if this is an issue for you. And then that we'll wrap it up by putting it into making sure that their care plan and their funding is actually allocated towards mitigating any of the issues that might occur as a result of that particular condition that they have. I think I might have had just one more. Oh, just another one that we had just recently around consumer advisory groups, tips for getting started for providers, tips for families and consumers, all those sorts of things. And so there's, other material that we will put in there as well.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned families. I'd imagine family members are probably showing interest in this as well, as opposed to just the recipients of care. It's their daughters, their sons, and the like.
Yes, absolutely. Well, very often we sometimes get some questions from providers, or comments saying, look, we don't have many clients that have got an email address, or we're struggling to collect that sort of information. But one of the things that I always say to them is that even if while you're building your the amount of information, so the email addresses and other contact details like that for consumers, just remember that their family members, they pretty much all have an email address. So start sharing where you can, and then plug those other gaps as you're going along. It's also worth remembering, and I'm sure that any of the providers that are on the session today will know, that in home care, 50% of all complaints that go to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission come from family members or representatives. And in the residential care space, it's around sort of 85 to 90% come from family members. So they are absolutely one of your key stakeholders when it comes to communication and engagement. So yeah, we're really, really keen to make sure that people understand that just getting information out to whomever it is that you've got an email address for is super important. And then obviously for people that don't have one, is thinking about how do you give hard copies where people want hard copies, and what's the best, most effective way of doing that, with it, including the printout with your monthly statements, or any other way that you actually can distribute those sorts of things to your clients.
I'd imagine too, for providers that provide both home care as well as residential aged care, that this is a very effective tool to build a pipeline of people that can potentially access residential aged care at the right time. Has that come up in conversations from the providers?
Do you mean like as people are sort of moving through?
Yeah, as moving through, so they can start to communicate to people ahead of time as to what services they might have, or more I suppose more, increased services as people progress. They need more care, and this, if you like, creating that pipeline of people through communication, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and this sort of ties into that a little bit, is that one of the ways that we've had feedback from some of our providers who have actually noticed over time that their service utilisation, or the client's budgets, have actually been better utilised over time, because there's now more ideas of then how they can meet and align spending with their actual assessed care needs. And I guess, so that in terms of being able to allocate resources where they're needed, sometimes the care managers, they don't necessarily get the sector information either, neither do their clients, because they're busy doing the doing. But what they find is that they can use the information in our newsletters to go, oh my goodness, I never even knew that existed. This would be an awesome product for, Mary or Joseph, or who I shouldn't mean it like Mary and Mary or John or whatever, to be able to build their own knowledge of what's happening in the sector, and how can they then become the expert in the organisation to help their clients get better utilisation of their package. And then potentially, because we also, in the home care newsletter, we'll still cover topics that relate to people who might be, you know, looking to move into residential care or at that higher acuity level where they might have a family member or others that are doing most of the caring for them.
You've almost answered a question that's just come in, but I'll read it out because I think it's important. Somebody's asked, would it be appropriate to have some information on client contribution? Many consumers do not understand why they have to pay for the service.
Yeah, we actually do have an article on that. We've got about, well, I think we're up to our 16th edition. So we've got well over 200 articles that are in constant circulation. So what we also do is just to let people know is that we don't just start people at edition 16 or 17. We actually we make sure that all of our new subscribers get all the goodness that we've actually done over the months, and we update all of our content every month. So we know that, so anything that's time sensitive, we pull it out and replace it with something else. But it means then that the information that we've got on explaining home care fees and charges, everyone's going to get that. So, you know, that might be, I think it's in edition 4, but everyone that starts the newsletter will get that information as well. By the same token, if there's something that's really super hot topic, like when the Code of Conduct and SIRS started just before Christmas last year, we just did an extra page and we just distribute that to every single one of our subscriber providers so that they all could share that immediately with their clients. We didn't think it would be right to wait until edition 15 for that for them. So yeah, that's the kind of way that if there's something that's a really hot issue, we'll do it. And we also take lots of requests from providers saying, hey, can you do something on how we maintain it, you know, the importance of maintaining equipment and how that actually works under home care packages, or what's another one that we've had just the other day, that antibiotic resistance one that came up through a conversation with a provider, and within a couple of days we pulled that together, and that was ready to go into the next edition as well.
Great. I might just go back. There's a couple of questions people asked when they registered, so to be fair to those people, I better put those to you now. Someone asked if the newsletter either has surveys or can support surveys.
Yeah, so I had to think about that question, and what I think that means is, well, essentially, look, satisfaction surveys, if what we're talking, because of the connection, that second half of that question was something to do with star ratings.
Yeah, so I think they were asking whether it could play into almost residential aged care, and understanding people's views on quality and satisfaction.
Correct. So at this point, we don't embed surveys in our newsletter per se, but what is so important to, and this is a really good example of it, is because the newsletter in that format that I showed you before, lots of our providers actually, they use our content and they repurpose it into their own newsletter. So or they white label it so that it's got their own logo and their own colors and things like that. So what they'll do is that if you want to, the content then becomes your own, you put that into your own template, and then you could, by all means, in fact, I thought it was actually a pretty good idea. You could actually then have a page every month if you want to, which has questions that might reflect the resident experience surveys in residential care. And you could ask those questions and just have a live link that's continuously feeding information through to the back end of your own survey, SurveyMonkey account or something like that, and collecting information and giving your clients an opportunity, or family members as well, an opportunity to provide that feedback on a regular basis, and trying to get to the same sorts of questions that might appear in the residents' experience survey will really give them that feedback that they need. Then they've got the evidence that they need to start building that picture of, yes, we're engaging really well with our clients. That, you know, people are reading this information, they're learning, and they really enjoy reading it as well. So I actually thought that was quite an interesting question. So you gave me a few good ideas too.
Yeah. There's another question here again that was asked at the time of registration. How does the subscription work, and what is the price?
Yep, sure. So the subscription works by providers signing up through our website page, and then they pay a monthly subscription. So essentially we do all the work behind the scenes, we create all the content in the newsletter, and then at the first week of every month we send out all of our newsletters to all of our subscribers, And then the provider has the option of sort of unlocking that PDF, adding their own logo, changing the colors, doing whatever they want to do once they've to repurpose the content in their own templates, or they can just send ours as it is, which is completely fine. Then they'll distribute that to their clients and families via email or post, or a combination of both. In terms of the price, we keep the price super affordable. So prices start at $247 a month for each of the newsletters, which is a minimum of sort of 10 to 12 pages of articles every month, which of course would take absolutely hours. We regularly get great feedback from the from marketing teams, just saying, how many hours it saves them from being able to do having to put together the newsletter. We've also recently offset $247 for up to 500 consumers in the care packages. And there's a different pricing structure for providers that have more than 500 clients, or if they've got multiple service outlets. But we sort of work out a really good pricing structure for them. And we've also recently introduced a bi-monthly option for some providers that were finding that they needed, especially small providers that had a lot of work to do outside of that. And so there's a different pricing structure around that as well.
Okay, great. A question's just come through, which I think is quite timely to ask now. Are you going to provide this service to residential aged care facilities?
Yes. Well, that was and Sean and I had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, and I said, actually, this might be a really good opportunity for me just to sort of mention that we have had a lot of requests for residential aged care, and so yeah, we're actually just in the process of building together our the Resi Gazette. And essentially, we're just working on the first couple of editions of that so that we'll be ready to launch that in the next month or two. So for sure, if anyone's interested in having a look at that, then if they want to just get a sample of the home care newsletter when we give them that detail in a sec, and then we'll make sure that we send information out to all of the people that have ever registered to get the home care sample. Then we'll send that information to them as well about the residential care newsletter as soon as that's ready to go. Yeah, so that's a pretty exciting thing for our 2023. We're just overwhelmed with the amount of interest in residential care newsletters. Yeah, so we'll be finding a way of actually, and we'll bring some expertise into the team as well to make sure that we've got that covered off.
Oh, good, very good. And be sure to send us some information because we'll do a story on Inside Aging just to announce the launch.
Thanks.
Another question, this question was asked before when people registered. How do consumers get access to the newsletter?
Yeah, so other than if their provider is a subscriber to the newsletter, then the provider will work out the most effective way of communicating that directly to their consumers. But we sometimes get questions from consumers directly from themselves that are saying, look, we're really interested in this, we want to get a hold of it, but obviously they're not going to be paying the subscription price. So what we've done in the past and what we're happy to do, in the future as well, is where a consumer or family member really wants to access the newsletter, then we'll usually ask them if they'll introduce us to their provider, and so have a chat with the provider, let them know that this is something that their customers, their consumers are really keen to have information on. But rather than just having it being sent to one consumer, which we could do outside of our system, but what we'd prefer is, of course, is that if they've got 200 or 300 consumers of their own, is that they actually are then saying this is something that we could really benefit from for our whole of organisation. So yeah, so consumers would get it, email, post. Sometimes they're actually added to consumer apps where there's a communication app that's with a portal or some way of family members or consumers being able to access that information. So it can be uploaded as on a tile for some of the consumer communication program platforms that are out there. That software, they can be uploaded to that, so everyone gets it like bang, just like that. It's uploaded and out it goes, and then people can read. But certainly, if it's a consumer that just wants information, then we will work with them to discuss that with their provider for sure.
And just on that, where you've got a communications app, for example, would it be the provider that would drive that integration, where they'd say, hey, we want to have the home care or aged care newsletter in the app, or do you also speak to the app providers themselves?
Yeah, actually, good question. We're both. So where there is already some communication platform that the provider utilises, then yes, we would. They would probably. In fact, we sometimes get requests because they've just integrated or embedded a new system where they now have a tile on the app that's empty. So that's a good place for them, so they can actually do it. But we do have quite a few relationships with some software providers. That then they can actually show if their client, the provider, if they're discussing it, then they can actually show how they can value add to that provider by but then doing an introduction to us as well. So we don't. They just do the sort of hand it over and say, look, this is available. Here's what it looks like. Here's some information, and then they'll hand them back to us for a conversation about meeting their needs more specifically.
Okay, no, good. Well, we're sort of getting towards the end of our time. We try to keep these at not more than half an hour, and we're about at half an hour. So if there's any more questions, please type them in now. There'll be a recording of this session that'll go up at Inside Aging later today, and it'll also have Anna's details. So you're welcome to refer back to that, or make contact with Anna and her team. There's also a QR code, which if you've got your mobile handy, you can also scan that, and that should connect you directly with Anna's team. I don't see any more questions, so we might even leave it there, Anna. Thanks very much for sharing what you did, and all the very best. And we look forward to hearing from you when you launch the Resi Gazette. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thank you everyone for coming along today. And we hope to catch up with you with some of you in the future.
Great. Thanks again.
Thanks again. Thanks, Sean.